depths of the sea. Creation's revealing your majesty. From the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in a song that it sings, all exclaiming, indescribable. poured my heart before even time began. My life was in His hands. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls. He hears me when I call. I have a Father. He calls me His own. He'll never leave me, no matter where I go. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls. He hears me when I call. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls. He hears me when I call.
When Marguerite and I were first training to become foster parents, we had to do all kind of weird stuff. We had to jump through all kind of hoops and basically go above and beyond what a lot of normal parents would do. To be accepted in the foster system, you've got to meet all these criteria. Obviously, you had to have a home study where they would come through and they would check your home for lead-based paint. And they checked everything. We had to actually change out all of our blinds. They were so particular. They would check. They would rub the blinds with this little marker, and if it turned green, well, they're like, well, you got lead. These are made in China. You probably bought them at Walmart, right? Yeah, we'll go buy them somewhere else. So we had to replace all the blinds in our house. We had to scrape and repaint the entire house. Change the windows. All these things. Some of it was safety. Some of it was just in case your kid wanted to eat the blinds. Hadn't seen that yet, but there is that chance. You never know. We had to go through all kind of classes of what to do with special needs kids, what to do with different kind of situations, and we had to have what they called a home study where they actually did a report on us. And they'd sit there and they'd talk to you and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? And they would ask you all these questions. What would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? It was this long report. It was very annoying. And it went all the way back to, how were you raised? And they would ask you, how did your parents discipline you? And my dad actually, he disciplined me very well. He would always sit down and say, here's what you did wrong. Here's why that is wrong. Here's why that is wrong from the Bible. By the time I was about 10, I'm like, just get on with the spanking, okay? Figured out a lot of it was giving him time to calm down. But he would talk to me, he would share with me every reason why I was getting spanking, or whatever the punishment was, and it was very clear it was never just in anger. You broke the rules, I'm gonna, whatever. And it was always done well. And one thing my dad was a strong man. 3/8 dowel rod. Okay? This was my dad's safety measure. You know why? Because it'll break. It stings like crazy when it hits. But if you ever hit a kid too hard, it'll break. It'll break before it can leave a welt. Ow. Think that through. But that was his safety measure against his own strength. He's like, I will never, ever hit you too hard. I won't use a belt. I won't use a paddle. I will always use something that stings just enough, but it will break before it ever hits you too hard. I was very grateful for that. Should have bought stock in 3/8 dowel rods when I was a kid, because we went through a lot. But, you know, I would tell her that, and I'd say, you know, my dad would always, you know, and she'd say, give me an example. I said, well, Dad had told me not to run in the house, and I ran through the house and broke something. He would sit me down and say, listen, I'm not spanking you because you broke something, because I'm mad about that. I'm spanking you because you broke the rules. We had set up these rules. You know, the Bible says children obey your parents. He'd give me all these different things, and then I would get the spanking or the punishment, grounding, whatever it was. And she would ask me questions. How do you and your wife communicate? And, you know, we'd talk, and Marguerite, she asked Marguerite, you know, how does Johnny communicate? She's like, Johnny is a really good communicator. We talk about everything. He's not one of these quiet types who won't tell you his feelings. He's not one of these guys, you know, that you have to beat over the head in order to get him to talk to you. He opens up. You know, there were other questions like, you know, if a child comes to you from a different religion, would you be willing to take them to their house of worship? I said, no, because I'm a music and children's pastor at my church. I can't necessarily skip church on Sunday to go take them somewhere else unless they're Jewish and we can do it on Saturday. You know, I can't really skip church to take somebody. Well, we finished the study. Took us over a year to get our house back in order, to go through all the classes, all the hours of training, and then all these reports saying there are millions of children in Greenville County with nowhere to go. Please sign up as a foster parent. They never called us. We're like, well, what's going on? So we finally went back and they said, there's something in your case study. And they let Marguerite and I read our case study. And we looked at it, and it was so infuriating. Now looking back on it, it's kind of funny. It is kind of funny, but it was absolutely infuriating at the time, sitting at the DSS office, reading my case study. When I said my dad was a good disciplinarian, he used a thin dowel rod to spank me, never spanked me in anger, never. And, well, one time, but it still wasn't overdone. And he apologized for it. And I deserved it. I snuck out in the middle of the night with a bunch of gang members in East Chicago.
Yeah, you deserve it.
I deserved it. But he still didn't overdo it. I was appreciative of that. But the case report said Johnny's dad would beat him with a wooden rod for running through the house and breaking things. I'm like, I never said that. I said just the opposite of that. And then we were reading down farther, and it said Johnny talks to Marguerite so she won't beat him over the head. I lie to you not. She used the phrase, he's not one of these guys you got to beat over the head to get him to talk to you. The phrasing, Johnny talks to Marguerite so she won't beat him over the head. Like, no wonder they didn't place a kid in our house. And then they said, the Larrabees are not willing to take any foster kids who were not raised in a Baptist home. I'm like, what? Were you high? What were you smoking when you did our home study? And then no wonder, because they get to that point, and they're like, well, we don't have any foster kids that were raised as Baptists. I'm sorry. So they actually gave us a pen, and we spent hours editing our own home study and gave it back to them. It was very annoying. We thought we were already kind of good parents. Well, I'm unqualified. After years, after having 12 foster kids in, one biological daughter and one adopted daughter, it's I'm realizing I'm clueless. I am absolutely clueless. I'm still asking, counselors and people, how do I raise this child? How do I raise, because Bella is nothing like Josie. Not a bit. Trying the same techniques for Bella that worked for Josie doesn't work. And we're still working on you. Quit smiling. She's like, yeah, I arrived. You're a good dance instructor, though. The thing also, Marguerite and I came from different backgrounds. In her house, the living room was the neat place. In my house, as long as it went back to neat before the company arrived, it could also be a gymnasium. My dad taught me how to high jump in our living room. I learned how to do the Fosbury flop by pulling all the sofa cushions out, setting up a rod. In Chicago, it's not always the nicest weather to go outside. I wanted to learn how to high jump, so we just set up the living room. As long as it went back, the living room was free game. That's so our and then being missionary kids in the Amazon, going from Chicago to the Amazon, that's just not even fair. So we're running, and I'm letting the kids do flips on the sofa. And she's like, well, what are you doing? I'm teaching them how to do flips. What does it look like I'm doing? And so we have this dynamic between us, and who's right? Who's to say? We have to work that out. We have to work that out between us. Who's to say what's the right way to raise Bella? We have to figure that out based on her. So I'm standing up here, we're talking about the passage, children obey your parents. We're going to read that passage in just a minute. And I'm standing up here saying, I really want to do a 6-week series on this, just so I can hear myself preach to myself for 6 weeks about what I'm supposed to be doing differently. So, if y'all, Marguerite really hasn't ever beat me over the head, just so you know.
Sure.
Actually, no, but as far as you know. Okay, back to the Bible. Colossians chapter 3, verse 20. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is pleasing to the Lord. Fathers, do not antagonize your children, so that they will not become discouraged. We hear these verses, and they're being directed at children. They're addressed to children. Starts out, children, obey your parents. The verses before says, wives, be subject to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives. It's really cool. We can't say, well, that's not talking to me. Because it starts the verse, children, obey your parents in the Lord. This is pleasing, or in everything, this is pleasing to the Lord. We see other parallel verses in Ephesians 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may turn out well for you and that you may live long on the earth. That's a quote from Exodus, from the Ten Commandments. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. We see those parallel verses, and when we were growing up, we had to memorize this. Children, obey your parents. Children, obey your parents. We teach it over in children's church. Children, obey your parents. You're supposed to obey your parents. Obey your parents in the Lord. That means in the things of the Lord. So if, I were to ask my child, hey, can you distract that clerk so that I can rip off his cash register? That's not necessarily obeying in the ways of the Lord. That's a different story. But the command is to children. We teach the verses, we teach them that this is a big area. This is a big deal. We should teach them to obey. God takes it very seriously. This goes back to the beginning of the passage. It talks about setting aside the old ways, putting on the new ways. This goes back to all of that. Getting my notes in order here. We put this pressure on kids because God takes it seriously. Check this out. We don't always think about this, but in Romans 1, God talks about how the earth has denied and rejected God. And every way that they have turned to all sorts of detestable behaviors, from everything, homosexuality and murder, and it goes on and says, just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, this is Romans 1:28, God gave them up to a depraved mind. In other words, they didn't honor God, so God said, okay, the worst thing I can do, the wrath of God, the worst thing God can do is to turn you over to yourself. That's the worst punishment he can give you. He turned them over to their depraved mind to do those things that are not proper. People having been filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unfeeling, and unmerciful. Notice that the most detestable things that you can do are listed here. Disobedient to parents is stuck right in the middle of that. Again, in 2 Timothy 3:1. But realize this, that in the last days, that's us, difficult times will come. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, slanderers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. That's pretty, if God were to go on one of those rants that you see on TV, I mean, if he were to just go off on this crazy rant, you self-loving, money-loving, boastful, arrogant, slanderer, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossip, disobedient to parents, it's right in the middle of all the worst things that if God were going to let out a rant, that would be right in the middle. He takes it very seriously. He considers that disobedience to parents to be part of the most depraved state of mankind. The most depraved state of mankind, with all the sexual sins and murder and everything else that's going on, disobedient to parents is stuck right in the middle of the list. So God takes it seriously. So when we teach this to kids, yeah, we put a big priority on it. Matter of fact, it's in the 10 Commandments. Honor your father and mother. Love your husband and wife isn't there. It says don't commit adultery. Don't cheat on them, but you don't even have to like them. I love you guys. He puts a big priority on this. We want our kids to obey. Even non-Christians want their kids to obey. The most sinful parent in the world will admit that obedient kids make the home much more joyful. I mean, that's just natural. But here's what makes the difference between this commandment and everything else. In this chapter, it talks about turn away from ungodliness, from sexual sins, from hatred, from slander, basically all the things that we just read. Turn away from those and turn to God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. That's how the chapter started. And he said, wives, submit to your husbands. He addressed that to the women. He never once said, husbands, teach your wives how to submit. Never said that. Somehow guys think that's their job. I used to work in a cabinet factory with a lot of guys from that culture. And I remember I'd come in and they'd have all their junk food. You know, they'd be eating gummy worms and chips and soda for lunch. And I'd pull out my sandwich and, you know, my salad, tuna salad, whatever. And they'd look at me and go, man, I can't wait to get married. Then I can make my wife make me a lunch like you do. You think that's what marriage is about? Oh yeah, she's supposed to submit. I'm like, you know that verse starts out with wives. That means you can go blind to the rest of that sentence. It ain't talking to you, man. It ain't talking to you. You go blind to the rest of that sentence. That is between them and God, not you. It is not your job to make them submit. That is between them and God. And then I'd go on to tell them, I go to work an hour before my wife, so while I'm making my lunch, I make hers too. They looked at me like I was from Mars. Really? Yeah. Sometimes it works out that way. It's just the family dynamic. It's okay. Now, she always made the tuna salad and the chicken salad that I put in the sandwich to actually make it worth eating. But when I would take what she made, put it between two pieces of bread, I was doing that for her. Husbands, love your wives. Doesn't say wives, manipulate your husbands to make them love you. Doesn't say that. Then it goes on and says, children, obey your parents. It never leaves the children alone to do that. The next verse says, fathers, do not antagonize your children so that they will become discouraged. It takes that verse, when it's commanded to children, it never leaves it alone. It never says, kids, this is between you and God. It always puts it back on the parents. In Ephesians, it says, fathers, don't provoke your children, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. It starts out by saying, children, obey your parents. Then it finishes by saying, this is how you guys can accomplish that. It never leaves the instruction with the children. In the Old Testament, honor your father and mother. Yes. All the way through Proverbs, listen to your father's instruction. Listen to the wisdom of your mother. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. It never leaves the commandment for these kids to figure out how to obey their parents on their own. It gives them the command, and then it puts the raising of the kids and the training of how to do that back on the parents. It always puts it back on the parents. Proverbs says, my son, listen to my wisdom. He didn't say, my son, have wisdom. Figure it out for yourself. He said, my son, listen to my wisdom. Listen to the instruction of your mother. Where the son got the wisdom was in the home. Unfortunately, Solomon kind of dropped the ball on that one, even though he wrote it. In fact, who can we look to in the Bible as perfect parents? Nobody. There are no perfect parents in the entire Bible. God never points back to a person and says, that guy is a good parent. Matter of fact, if you were going to qualify, write a book on dysfunctional parents, you go straight to the Bible. Adam and Eve were created in the image of God in total perfection and screwed it up. Not only did they mess their own family up, they messed up the entire human race. Abraham had 13 kids by 4 different women. Okay. You want dysfunctional? Most of you read the families of the Old Testament, by American standards, most of them would be in jail and on death row. The crimes that they committed against their own families, they were messed up people. Who did God set up as the example for a good father? Himself. Who did he set up as the example for a good husband? Himself. He never pointed to another human because humans can't do it. We're not called to be good parents because of our ability to be good parents. We're called to be good parents because of his ability. When God called Gideon and said, I want you to wipe out the Midianites, Gideon said, I can't do that. God said, I know. When he told Moses, lead the children of Israel out of bondage, Moses said, I can't do that. God said, I know. He doesn't call us because we're able. He calls us because he's able. And so he starts off with, he says, children, obey your parents. And then he gives the before and after, just like he did before. Put off gossip and anger and murder. Put on love, kindness, compassion. He starts off with the put off. Fathers, don't antagonize your children. And that's parents. That's a plural. Just like when we say to all men, meaning all people. Fathers or parents, do not antagonize your children so that they will not become discouraged. The different versions of the Bible, whatever you may be reading, one says, do not embitter your children. Another says, don't aggravate your children. Another says, don't provoke your children. Another says, do not exasperate your children. These are all different ways of accomplishing the same thing. Ephesians, the parallel passage, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Now the phrase to wrath wasn't actually in the original. It was added to try to make it more understandable, but in truth, it's don't provoke your children to anything. But bring them up in nurture and admonition of the Lord. So the first commandment we see is in the negative. We see this commandment, just like in the first part of the chapter, what we need to stop doing. Stop provoking your children. Provoke means to stimulate or give rise to a reaction or emotion, typically a strong or unwelcome one in someone else. To incite someone to do or feel something by arousing anger in that person. That's what provoking means. So in other words, if you're taking notes, this is the part you write down. What provoke, aggravate, embitter, exasperate, what this means is don't treat your kids in a way that actually draws out and develops the sin nature that we're trying to help them overcome. The goal of perfect parenting, or proper parenting, is to help our kids overcome their sin nature. If we're treating them in a way that actually helps them develop that sin nature, instead of stopping the bad behavior, it creates a pathway for that sin. That's what exasperating your children means. So here are some how-tos on how to exasperate your children, in case you don't know. In case you don't know how to aggravate and embitter your children, here are some how-tos. Rules and structure. Not enough, inconsistent, or too much. Kids that grow up in a home with no rules, I've heard these conversations before. They'll be talking to kids, man, my dad has so many rules, and they're actually jealous of the kid with rules. Because when there's no structure, no rules, no discipline, kids are left to figure out their own moral code for themselves. Kids are not capable of that. That's what we just discussed. We just discussed that kids aren't going to figure that out on their own. So, no rules or structure leaves kids to figure out their own moral code. An inconsistent moral structure basically gives the same results. The kids are confused. The kids are insecure. They don't know how to trust you. If you say, I'm going to punish you for this and you don't, or I'm going to reward you for this and you don't, or one time you do and one time you don't, what is this? If you're not consistent with how you do it, then how can I be consistent in my response to what you're asking? So it puts them back to the top category. They become responsible for their own moral code. I've seen this as a guitar teacher. It was beautiful because kids would come in my office and just start talking. Sit down, pull out the music, or at a piano, pull out the music. How's it going? Next thing you know, they're unloading on you like you're a therapist. That's actually one of my earliest motivations to getting ordained, because kids started telling me some really personal stuff of what was going on in their house. And it's like, I'm acting as a pastor, I've been in the role as a pastor for a long time, but I'm not officially ordained. I need to get ordained so, number one, I can be held to secrecy. I can't be put on a stand, but I can also confront these parents with some boldness if I need to. Kids who are used as pawns in a divorce. Mom and dad get divorced, they use their 8-year-old as a pawn. Dad has rules, mom has rules. They have structure in each individual home. But they're using this kid as a pawn. The pawn says, I can't trust either one of you, because right now I'm acting more mature than both of you. If you're willing to use an 8-year-old as a pawn in your divorce case, I'm more mature than both of you, therefore I'll develop my own moral code. Thank you. And it never goes well. Too many rules, too much structure, gives the kids no freedom. There are more movies and stories and TV shows written on that. Kids committing suicide because of the pressure put on them to perform. Kids being held under so many rules, so many regulations, that the kids pop. It's basically parenting in that environment is how to build a better Pharisee. Got our Build-A-Bear workshops. Doing it this way is build a Pharisee. I'm going to install this behavior, and I'm going to punish you until you do it. I'm going to install this behavior, and I'm going to reward you until you do it. And I'm going to build you to look exactly like I want, regardless of what it actually does for you as a person. How to build a better Pharisee is you put a lot of regulation, a lot of rules. Now, we got to have them. We got to have rules. We got to have structure. We got to have punishment. We got to have discipline. Which punishment, consequence, and discipline are all different things. There are three different things. They can never be combined. Consequence is you broke that, clean it up, and pay for it yourself. That's a consequence. Punching somebody bigger than you and getting your head knocked off. That's a consequence. Discipline is teaching someone to do something properly the right way, over and over again. They're all different things. Punishment is sometimes implemented to help in the discipline. Too harsh of punishments. Over spanking your kids. Using 2x4s and leather straps instead of something that'll keep you accountable. Setting too high standards and over punishment is a good way to exasperate your children. Setting yourself up as God. So, well, I don't set myself up as God. Try this one. I never talked to my dad like that. Could you just use it as an example for perfection? I would never speak to my dad like that when I was your age. 9 times out of 10, the person that would say, I never spoke to my dad like that when I was your age, because he'd knock my head off. He'd knock me in the next week. You know, I'll hit you so hard your kids will be born with headaches. You know that. Okay? What did that person do when their dad wasn't looking?
Whatever they wanted.
Exactly. To look in your dad and say, yes, sir, to look at your mom and say, yes, ma'am, and then do something that would dishonor them if anybody knew about it. So, I'm going to get into this relationship and hang out with these friends and go into this kind of thing. Why do we do that? Generally because we think our parents dropped the ball. My dad didn't love me enough, so I'm going to run to this guy. My mom didn't love me enough, so I'm going to run to this girl. I'm going to inoculate the pain that my parents caused by getting into something that is completely dishonoring to them, and then I'm going to tell my kids, I respected my parents. Quit lying to yourself. Seriously, let's all just quit lying to ourselves. Quit saying that when I was a kid, I did it better than you. Because we didn't. We just didn't. Another way to do that, to set yourself up as God, is to say that I'm punishing you because I'm the offended party. Put the kids to bed. 9 o'clock. 11 o'clock, they're in there fighting. Get out of bed. Do you know what I do for you during the day?
No.
Do you know what and start chewing them out. Or a kid breaks the rule or breaks something. It's like, do you know how much that costs? As adults, if somebody is red-faced, does that change you? If somebody is yelling at you red-faced, do you know what you just cost me? Do you know how you offended me? Does that actually change? Do you ever say, oh, I see the love of God. Oh, my heart has changed. If good parenting was done with yelling, God could probably do that. I mean, I personally think it would be really effective. If God just showed up in Russia and said, stop! And the whole earth shook. Go to your room. You know, if yelling at kids is effective parenting, then God would have done that. Because God is our perfect Father. If yelling and screaming and getting angry is effective parenting, God would have done that. And whenever we do that, we're always coming back to me. Do you know how much you're disturbing me? Do you know how much I am inconvenienced by your behavior? We're setting ourselves up as God. When we tell our kids, when we compare our kids to other people, when we compare our kids to ourselves, why can't you be what I was? Why can't you be like these other people? When you say, why can't you act any better? You exist for the glory of Almighty me. That's not a good way to parent. Comparing them to other kids is a good way to get your kids to hate you. So far, I'm still in the negative, sorry. Not knowing them. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go. How many of you have read the book, The 5 Love Languages? The author took the book, took love and narrowed it down to five ways of expressing love. Only 5. Number 1, words of affirmation. Hey, you're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. To a kid whose love language is words of affirmation, if you say, why can't you be more like your friends, or more like your older sister? If your love language is words of affirmation, you may as well have punched that kid in the face by giving negative feedback. If the kids, I've known people like this. Father's very distant. The kid's love language is physical touch. I want to hug. I want to sit in your lap. I want to cuddle with you. The dad's like, no. That's not what we do here. That kid is going to be devastated. Knowing your children, knowing how and how they're different. Knowing how they're different. Some kid giving gifts is a good way to express love. Kids who don't really care, who don't relate that way, if you buy them $1 million gifts and they're like, I don't want this junk. I just want to sit in your lap. It's actually offensive, but we don't take time to know our kids. That's a good way to exasperate them. Spending quality time, doing acts of service, all these different things. It goes with kids, it goes with husbands and wives. But obviously, like I said, we're trying to raise Bella the same way we raised Josie. And it's not always working. Sometimes it does. But we're trying to figure this out. So if we have all these things that can exasperate our children, we're saying, okay, how do we do it right? I don't know. I thought we already established that. I'm done. Just kidding. Remember what I said. You're not called to be a parent because you are able. You're called because He is able. He is able to do in you what He requires you to do. If He says, raise your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, He will empower you to do that. He does not want you to understand love from anybody else but Him. I heard Paul Tripp say this: you will never acquire the ability to love from someone that you are called to love. These love songs that say, I never knew what true love was until I met you. Give it a few years. That's falling in love. Falling takes no talent. Anybody can fall in love. It's when you land solidly on the ground and you are in it. You are in this love situation. You will never gain the ability to love from the person that you have been called to love. Why? Because that person's a sinner just like you. That person needs grace just like you. I will never gain my ability to love from my wife or my children because they are sinners just like me. I'm a sinner. They are a sinner. When I look at my child and their bad behavior, I can't think, man, they're tired. Or they're grumpy. Or something's not right. I have to say they are acting in a way that required Jesus to give His life. Their sin, what they're doing right now, is so severe that Jesus had to die for that. That is what grace is about. That's what understanding it is all about. God used himself as the example of a perfect parent and the perfect husband. Why? Because we have to look at him. We have to look at him and say, God, I need your power. I need your ability in me, and I need to understand grace the same way that you did. Now, this isn't just about parenting, if you haven't figured that out. This is about living our lives. We can talk to this about people who have kids in the house, people who don't have kids in the house. It's about how we love other people. When I see somebody that annoys me, if I see somebody who's ticking me off, and I want to get angry, I've got to realize I'm a sinner, you're a sinner. I need grace as much as you do. I need forgiveness as much as you do. I'm not any more special than you are. I need to extend the grace that God gave me to you. That's what love is. That's what love is. Love is patient. We'll talk about this more in the future. I'm not going to teach a 6-week series on parenting, don't worry. But the next few passages talk about relationships, interpersonal relationships, our relationships to other Christians. We need to really examine what love means. If you're being weak right now, I need to treat you like I would want somebody to treat me when I was weak. I need to use my strength to help you, to teach you. How that translates into parenting is something that we have to learn from godly wisdom. If somebody's done it before, if somebody in our same situation has done it before, we can learn from them. There is no 12 steps to better children, because each child is different. It's, God, teach me how to parent this child to where I'm approaching this child with your grace and your wisdom, and I'm using your rules, your regulations, your standard as my standard for raising them. And to think about it, when we go in, when we talk to our kids, when we talk to our husbands or wives, when we talk to our coworkers, would we want somebody speaking to us the way we speak to them? Would we want somebody speaking to us the way we speak to them? I saw a guy yell at his wife once, and we weren't close enough, but we were close enough that I could take a risk. And I said, dude, if I talk to your wife that way, you'd hit me. If I spoke to your wife the way you're speaking to your wife, you'd hit me. If your kid spoke to your wife the way you're speaking to your wife, you'd spank them. What gives you the right to do that? We have to take it all the way back to us. I'm a sinner. I'm in need of grace. I'm going to call up the praise team. Now this is hard. It's not easy. I wish I could just give 12 steps to better children, to training up children, to raising them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But I can't. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. Then I'll preach a 6-week series on it. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. But I know this, that a lack of grace, looking at your child as needing less grace than you do, or than you did, or that I do, or looking at me to say, Johnny, I'm upset with you. And I've probably upset some of you already. I would want you to extend the same grace to me that God extended to you. And I would like to do the same thing. And that's humbling. That is humbling to say, I need grace to deal with this other human being, to be able to somehow show the grace of God to them. Let's sing about that, please.
exchange it someday for a crown.
Heavenly Father, I ask you to teach us how to love with your love, to show grace like you showed us. And it's so hard to just stand up here and define, okay, this is what we should do and should not do, because it's so different with each person. The way we receive love is different. The way we give love is different, Lord. But teach us to learn to love from your example. Lord, what you did was you gave everything for us. You gave everything for us to make us more like you. Lord, teach us to give everything for others so that they can become more like you as well. So in Jesus' name, we say thank you and amen.